So much. Welcome to the boot camp session entitled What Are Employers Looking For Anyways? So we are so pleased to have some really outstanding panelists tonight. And I just ask students, if you have questions, you may put it in the chat. We'll also have a Q&A at the end that you can ask questions to any one of the panelists. And we also will be recording this. So if you'd like to go back and revisit anything, it will be posted on our bootcamp team site. So just to start off, my name is Kim Beeler. I'm a career coach at the University of Kansas Career Center. And I'd like to start this evening by just having each of our panelists introduce themselves. Tell them maybe what your major was, undergraduate majors. For some of us, you have to think way back, and you're glad it's on your resume so you don't forget. Otherwise, and then tell a little bit about your career trajectory and what you currently do as well. And then we'll go from there. So the first person that I see on my screen that's in line is you, Aaron. So if you wouldn't mind starting us off.
Yeah, my name's Aaron Kabler. I'm the general manager for Dell Technologies, running the Midwest and the enterprise accounts out of Kansas City. I've got a team of, 65 working for me as we kind of go after those things. I graduated from the business school. I help out with the sales program there at the business school as well. I actually started my college. I thought I wanted to be an attorney. I would have actually been eligible to be president in the next cycle. Because I originally started as a philosophy major, thinking I was going to go to law school and go into politics, and none of that worked out. And I ended up graduating from the business school with a degree in business administration with concentration in communication studies. I've been in, I've been in technology sales for about in leading teams for 23, 24 years now, I guess is what it is. And I kind of got into sales the same way a lot of people get into sales, is it ended up being more of a path that finds you versus you seek it out. I think now a lot of people seek it out, but in the 90s, that's just kind of where you ended up sometimes from the business school. And, I was able to, very fortunate to work for a Fortune 500 company out of school. And a lot of that has to do with, I built a network of people, not only when I was at school, so those that are talking about networking and doing that, good job. I've been in the industry 23 years, and I joke that I've never actually interviewed or actually put my resume in for a job. I always knew the job was there before it because of meeting with people and staying connected and reaching out to alumni and reaching out to and just doing good things. So that's, that was really what my career is. I started right out selling mainframes. Most of you have no idea what mainframes do. You're way too young for all of that. The interweb thing was new at the time, and so over the career, going from Unisys and then EMC, VMware, and now Dell. Dell bought EMC and by extension VMware. I can tell you the number one thing that is true and that I think people look for and that served me best is be curious. And I've always been curious and asked a lot of questions. Technology, especially my industry, changes every day. Every year it looks different. Things happen differently, different platforms, different ways to connect people, and just asking a lot of questions and always wondering how things work and ask why has served me very well in my career. So I don't know if that was too long or too short, but.
No, it's great. Thank you, Aaron. Appreciate that. Robert.
Yeah, thanks, Kim. And I'm glad, Aaron, you set the bar, so that'll be good for me. I go back a little bit further. I went to the University of Tulsa, graduated in 91 with my degree BS in marketing and then my MBA. And ironically, coming out of that, I interviewed with a company that was out of Little Rock, Arkansas at the time, and they were providing COBOL services on the mainframe for financial service institutions, for banks. So, checking accounts, commercial lending accounts, consumer lending accounts. And I went into that, as I said, from a marketing background and a business background. But as I got into my initial job with them, which ended up lasting 10 years, I spent over a year and a half learning how to code in COBOL code. And I say that more because I wasn't very good at it. They finally moved me out of it after I had, nested an if statement about 7 layers deep. And they said, "You're not any good at this." Um, but what it did give me was a foundation of what was good about that, what the mission of that company was, which ultimately they were an IT services company that was completely embedded in programming and coding, and so learning that and understanding and taking the time to do that was really, really important as I started off my career. I ended up moving in more into the marketing side and the business development side of the house later on. And ultimately in that 10-year cycle with them, I actually moved into what was called internet banking in its early infancy, literally the first non-brick and mortar bank that was using all internet banking. And I give a lot of the credit again back to the beginning where I got in to understand technology, even though it was completely different, in terms of COBOL versus HTML and code. But it allowed you to sit down with anybody in a business setting and be able to talk about challenges and opportunities, and listen to those people about what they were doing. So I did that. And then I had an opportunity to move to a company that I spent 19 years at, which was a company out of Kansas City called NIC. They specialize in digital government services. So kind of everything online that you do with government, whether that's paying taxes, getting your car tags renewed, buying a hunting and fishing license. But they had 28 states that they operated in. And I kind of described my career there over 19 years as the longer the career went, I went from more of a tactical position where obviously you are accomplishing things, doing, what, meeting with customers, driving projects, driving opportunities, driving sales, up the food chain till where I spent 7 years as chief operating officer for them, where you focus more on strategic and vision and what's coming next and 3 to 5 years out. But I would tell you during all 19 years, and Aaron made this point, sitting down and being able to ask questions and ask why and meet with, your customer, if you will, and just have open ears to what their challenges are and be able to present back solutions has been paramount in anything I've done during that tenure. I stepped away from that, took a little hiatus, and then I just joined up about 3 months ago with the Biosciences Technology and Business Center, which is over on the West Campus of KU. It is a organization that tries to support everything from entrepreneurial startup organizations to high-tech organizations. We specialize in providing, highly specialized space, value-added business services, and again, enable a networking environment where companies, regardless of size, can interact and create synergy out of their interactions on a daily basis. And so I've only been there, like I said, 3 months, but and I'll probably hit a couple more things on that as we go, but it's been pretty exciting. And I would tell you the types of companies that the BTBC has are really everything from life sciences, biosciences, high tech, meaning software, digital platforms, to architecture and engineering companies, and 56 companies that have been through kind of in the portfolio during my tenure. So I'll stop there and we can go on.
It's great. We've got lots of experience here. This is exciting. Thank you, Robert. Raveen, would you mind?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Rabin Valuri. My career is a little bit shorter by comparison. I graduated KU in 2015 with a BS in environmental science. And my first job out of college was at the Environmental Protection Agency. And that was through an internship I got during college. And at the Environmental Protection Agency, I worked in the Environmental Justice Department. And so what that means is we went into contaminated areas in low-income minority communities, excuse me, and talked about what contaminants were happening in the soil, the air, the water, and talked about what remediation tactics the government was going to be doing to, fix the area. And I found that in my time there, it was very purpose driven, but didn't rely enough on, my science background. And so I wanted to do something a little bit more technical. I didn't know what that was. And so I did what I'm sure a lot of the seniors are looking at now, and I looked into grad school. And I got my master's in hydrology and water resources from the University of Oklahoma. And while I was attending grad school online, I actually followed my partner out to New York City, where they had recently gotten a job. And I was working as an environmental educator at an outdoor education program. And so I was working with elementary students, teaching and going to school in the evenings. Um, Eventually, I got my degree in hydrology, and I knew I wanted to do something purpose driven, something that relied on the science background, but I also really loved kind of the interpersonal aspect of communicating. And so I thought, maybe I wanted to do something with, say the United Nations or some other governmental role. But what I ended up doing was kind of going through LinkedIn, looking for people who had corporate social responsibility, backgrounds, and just finding out what steps they took, where, what kind of opportunities they took. And I ended up working pro bono for the Safe Water Network for 3 or 4 months just to get that experience. And what the Safe Water Network does is they work in India and Ghana and provide, safe water access to low-income areas that don't otherwise have access to safe water. So working pro bono to get that experience really is, kind of what got me down the path of wanting to work in safe water, working in international resources. And at the end of my pro bono period, they actually offered me a contract to stay on for an additional 2 to 3 years. So I am currently a project manager working on establishing US projects through the Safe Water Network. But to echo what everyone else has been saying, it really is, kind of a byproduct of networking that I was able to get here. And even not knowing what the dream job was, kind of knowing what the idea of generally what I wanted to do, something purpose driven, something communication focused, something, leaning on my science background, and just running full speed ahead with those intentions in mind until, I landed up at the right spot.
That's great. Great. So we've got some techie people here. We've got a science, and we're not last but not least, we have our chemist over here. Daniel, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, please.
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Daniel Sabak. I am in great company on this panel, so wonderful. So I guess I'm the baby of the group. I graduated with my Bachelor's of Science in Chemistry in December of 2016. And my journey through KU was tumultuous, but it was enjoyable. So just a quick highlight. I started off studying chemical engineering. I started taking the actual core classes, and I realized that's not what I wanted to do. So I switched to chemistry, and from that point, I worked for 2 research labs, and then eventually switched to 1, became a student lab manager for the KU Biodiesel Initiative. So also heavily in the environmental sciences world. Did that for 3 years or 4 years while I was at KU. And I had 2 internships, one with the National Renewable Energy Lab and one with Renewable Energy Group. So the second internship landed me my first job out of college. So they offered me a job at the end of my internship. So fortunately, I got to spend my last semester at KU not having to job hunt. So that was really nice. But kind of what I wanted to echo what everyone else has been saying is I was able to land that internship and that job based off of networking, because I was able to leverage my connections at the National Renewable Energy Lab to then get into contact with my eventual department head at Renewable Energy Group. So step one is having that connection, and step two is following through, because that's another big one. Is you contact somebody, then you have to keep being persistent. That's actually how I got my first laboratory job, is I literally kept pestering that professor for 6 months until he finally was like, yes, you can work in my lab. So that was very nice, because he was like, yeah, come back to me in a couple months if you're still interested. And I literally put a calendar in reminder. I said, email Dr. Dedamore, and I did. And he was like, well, you're persistent, so okay. So anyway, I worked in Ames, Iowa for about 2.5 years. And then my wife ended up getting a job in Topeka. So I worked for the Kansas Department of Health and Environment and was absolutely miserable, because it was not the right fit for me. I went from a very research and development heavy role. So I was basically working on developing analytical methods for biodiesel. So I was helping with their like quality infrastructure, to basically just raw testing. But it was kind of a blessing in disguise, because those 7 months led me to then working for Hill's Pet Nutrition, because they were looking for a chemist that specialized in a certain type of instrumentation. So that experience at the state, coupled with my previous experience, gave me kind of a unique facet to be able to like be perfectly fit for this position. So I guess kind of the other highlight is whenever you're looking for your next step, try to have at least an idea of why you want to make that step. So I took the job at the state, took a $20,000 pay cut, but then was able to move on to another job that was honestly my dream job. I hope I can stay with them for a very long time. So
Excellent.
You know,
Thank
Kim,
you. What
I would say
great.
one thing that I was struck by each of the stories is, it's all about networking, but all four of us were passionate about the thing we were chasing. And networking is super easy when you know what you kind of want to do and where you want to be, because you want to go talk to people about it, right? And so that's my biggest advice to anybody is, there's a job out there for everybody. Just kind of know what you want and start that direction, and there'll be people that'll help you along the way, for sure. Just gotta talk to people.
Let's just jump into it. How do we talk about this every session that we've done? But let's just talk a little bit about that networking, because I think a lot of students are nervous about reaching out to people, don't know really what to say, feel like they're bothering, it feels yucky, it feels like you're just asking for something. Could you give some advice about how to go about networking? Maybe what you think is helpful, but also what are the pet peeves of networking? Like, what don't you like to see?
What I don't like to see is, I don't like to see people that reach out and say, I'm trying to build my network. That's obvious. You're reaching out, right? I get that. I would say that there's been, and I've got some stories. I've always got stories, but the biggest thing that you guys all have is KU has a massive alumni base throughout the United States. And I've got a couple of people that work for me on my staff that found me through LinkedIn. They were interested in technology jobs in Kansas City, and they went and looked for tech people at big tech companies that that graduated from KU, and reached out and said, and we're honest. They just said, hey, I'm looking for help to move back to the area. I'm interested in tech sales, or I'm interested in what you guys are doing. Are you willing to help? And that's the number one thing, is just be transparent on what you're asking for and be open about it. And I would leverage, LinkedIn and leverage the University of Kansas alumni base, because if a Jayhawk reaches out to me, if I got time, I give them the time, right? And so I would say, just be honest and use the fact you went to a big university or going to a big university to help kind of build a common bridge.
And that's how I got reached out to you, as I networked through Kristen. So
Yeah, I
it
mean,
does
you reached
work.
out to Kristen and she said, "Hey, do you want to help?" I was like, "Yeah." I told Kristen I'll show up on campus every day of the week if she wants.
There won't be anybody there, but you're welcome to come. Anybody else have some advice about that?
I just might echo what one of the things Aaron said, which is I really do think transparency about purpose is really important. I'm the same way. If somebody asks for help versus just saying, "Hey, I just want your name on my connection list," I'm more than willing. And I think showing that interest and asking questions, and I'll tell you, the thing I like the most, and it can be a little bit off-putting at times, but if people will send me like 3 or 4 questions in email just to start, so that I understand the context of what they're looking for, what their interest is, what their question may be. And then I can find, based on my schedule, carve out a window to do some of those versus kind of, and obviously you end up doing it both ways, but versus, "Hey, will you call me and just talk to me?" Well, I kind of like a little more, I would like to have a little more insight and prep so that I can make the most use of the amount of time I have on my schedule to help with that. So, if you students can, give a little forethought to what you're thinking about and what your interest is in talking with me or talking with any kind of mentor or contact, I think you'll get a lot further. And I would echo Aaron. I've just started getting involved in the KU mentoring network and the alumni network aspects of things. And I think that, using that, because those people that have signed up are already telling you, "Hey, we're here and we're willing to help." And that's half the battle, is finding somebody willing to help. So.
Perfect. Ruben, you were going to say something too, as well.
Yeah. I was just going to, echo those same sentiments, especially, with leveraging LinkedIn. But Robert, to what you just said, I think people who have expressed an interest in mentorship, those are the people who have, expressly said, "I'm here to help you." My mentor, had coaching in his LinkedIn bio, and to leverage LinkedIn, I think, is a very powerful tool. What the process I kind of went through when I was looking for new jobs or anything is to find someone who kind of aspirationally is at, towards the end of their career, or at least towards the height of their career, and find any commonalities you can between your kind of foundation and, their foundation, and then just send them a message and say, like, "Hey, we have kind of this foundational base in common, whether it's we both got a BS in environmental science, or we both went to KU, or both worked for the state for a couple of years, but you are, 30 years ahead in your career. What took you from point A to point B? What steps did you take?" And to, follow up on what Daniel was saying, is the following up is so important.
Yeah.
If you get a phone call with someone and they say, "Oh, I think this company, and this company would be really good to look into," or, "this organization," make a note of all those things, look into them, and then send them a follow-up email with more questions. Like, "I looked into this company and it seems like they have a really interesting, chemical engineering department. Do you know anything about this particular project they're working on?" Because the more you can show that initiative, that kind of follow through, I think the more success you'll have in finding a job, or at least establishing a firm network.
Yeah, and understand that sometimes that follow up you got to do it a few times. It's not that anybody you reach out to doesn't want to help or isn't doing it. It's
People are busy.
You know, in the last year, the world just looked different, and COVID made us all think different and act different. And, you know, we all are having to relearn how to do our jobs. And, you know, they're not 40-hour-a-week jobs. It doesn't sound like any of us have a 40-hour-a-week job. So, you know, just know sometimes you got to follow up a couple of times. Not that we don't want to help. Sometimes we get caught up in paying the bills. So
I want to open it up to see if any of the students have some questions before I begin. And then it looks like, Howard, you might have a question as well. Are there any
Well,
student questions?
Not yet, but I just sent a note in the last 3 minutes saying, hey, post your questions. So maybe give that just a
Or you
minute.
can just unmute and ask a question if you have a question.
That works. I wanted to follow up. I know Daniel is on KU Mentoring, and I know Robert knows about KU Mentoring, but I'm not sure Rabin and Aaron do. We have a localized Jayhawk LinkedIn, essentially, that we just launched maybe 3 years ago, called KU Mentoring, where it gives undergraduate students, graduate students the opportunity to reach out directly to alums who, as Aaron kind of already said, who have already raised their hand and said, oh, I am voluntarily creating a profile and going into KU Mentoring to show you who I am, and you can message me right here. And so if students out there, if you've not been to mentoring.ku.edu, it probably takes 10 minutes to set up a profile, and you have an automatic link with everybody who's there because it's organized around KU, and is for alumni to network with alumni, and also for students to network with alumni. So I'll put that in the chat in a second. I'm also just going to pop in really quickly. And I'm sorry I was late. I didn't even introduce myself. I'm Howard Graham. I'm the director of the Jayhawk Career Network. I was closing up our earlier Zoom. That's why I was late here. Thank you all for being here. Kim's heard me say this a couple times, but I love the Harvard Business Review podcast, the IdeaCast. Robert, I think I already pitched that to you, and they actually did a episode on networking last week. So it's brand new, it's fresh, and it's all about the different types of networkers people are. So I'll pop that. It's free. It's available online. It's 23 minutes, I think. So I'll pop that in the chat as well. It does look, Kim, like we do have a question.
Yeah, Jacob, you had a question, and Aaron, you graciously answered that. Is there any follow-up to that, Jacob, that you'd like to ask? The question was, do you have any suggestions what a follow-up communication might look like? And Aaron said, just very short, simple, and direct, those 3 words. So, Jacob, is there anything else that you'd like to ask in regard to that, or?
Daniel, what were you going to say?
Oh yeah, here, I'll add something to that real quick too.
Very
So
good.
I agree, but also be purposeful for any communication that you're giving. Because if you start messaging people and be like, hey, did you get my message? Hey, did you get my message? Then that's going to piss somebody off real fast. So if you're more like, hey, I have this other follow-up question, and you keep building onto your communication, then that just proves that you're excited. So I'll give an example. So when I applied for my job at Hills, I applied right before the holiday season, and some companies just shut down in between Christmas and New Year's. Just nobody's in the office. So because of that, there was a very long period of time where I just heard nothing. And I refrained from just being like, hey, just checking in, because it's like, you're just wasting somebody's time. So if I had a message that I wanted to send, it was like, oh, I have this other follow-up question, or I had this other thing I would like clarification on. And then it kind of was just like a gentle reminder of, hey, I'm still here. Hey, I'm still interested, but I'm not just trying to like poke you.
Yeah, I think 2 things too. I think if you can, and I know it's hard because sometimes you're very, very distant, whether it's in age or in experience from the person that you may be communicating with. But I find too, if somebody goes like, especially after we've gotten past kind of just introductions, and to Aaron's point, if I'm caught in the middle of paying the bills and I just haven't responded, if that person sends me a relevant article, for example, that is on a topic that had to do with, life sciences, or they saw that the BTBC had broken ground on their building, and they just sent it and said, hey, saw this in the paper, thought of you, congratulations. It just, that's much more, I am much more readily to immediately react to something like that versus like what Daniel was talking about. If somebody's just like, hey, wanted to touch base. And then the other thing I would just say, and I still do this today, is if I get to that like desperate hour where it feels like I'm just not going to get a reply from the person, I will literally, I'll just say, hey, it'd be really great if you don't have the time right now, or you don't have the bandwidth, or you're not interested, just let me know, and I'm going to keep moving forward and looking for other, opportunities to mentor or to grow my idea, whatever it is. And sometimes, I hate to say it that way, but the guilt card kind of also wakes people up a little bit too.
Yeah, and I think the thing is I think sending that relevant article or a question, right, Daniel, that was great, just to keep following on questions. I think that the thing that also does when people do that is it shows that they're doing a little bit of research, right? I mean, the brilliance that you guys all have that I didn't have, right? And some of the younger grads did, but that, I know Robert and myself didn't have, is you guys walk around with the answer to every question in your palm of your hand, right? You can do a 5-second search on LinkedIn, or, I work for Dell, go to Dell.com. We have 7 press releases a day, right? You can ask me a question about any of those things. It doesn't take a lot of time, but it does show that you took a couple of minutes to research, right? And to go look up some stuff on your own. And that's infinitely more impressive to me than someone that just asked, how did I get to where I'm at in my career, right? And a couple of business school grads specifically are interested in the social conscious stuff that Dell does. And, recently they got my attention because they found an article and sent it to me and said, hey, I'm interested in your thoughts and how your team's implementing this in Kansas City. That was a fascinating question to me, and it was something I was super happy to have a conversation about. So they got an immediate response.
Perfect. These are great answers. I think this is really helpful. I want to move on just a little bit to a different topic. And what are some of the skills in the whether it's working in the science industry or the technology industry, that you really want students to have, or when they're applying, or that you look at, or that you find is very important? What are some of those skills you like to see on a resume, in an interview? And any suggestions for these seniors who are getting ready to graduate in May, and they don't have a lot of time left to go, we'd like to see an internship in this and this. They need some practical advice. What can we do now to be the best that we can be prepared this next semester? I mean, do you want to start? You just graduated. Well, not just graduated. I'm sorry. Would you say in 2015, I think, right?
2015, yeah. So kind of what comes to mind to me is, how practical is your skill. I, especially in grad school, I had to learn a bunch of different, groundwater modeling programs and some kind of high level GIS, programming techniques. And, to have that certification or to have taken that class is one thing, but to kind of extrapolate the appropriate data and to be able to make that actionable. What can this data tell me, and can you actually put it into practice? And I think having that full kind of cohesive understanding of the science or the technology that you're working with, but being able to explain it to anybody in kind of an elevator pitch is very important.
Okay, great. Thanks.
I think that, for me, and probably Aaron too, we're a little bit different, that we're not highly technical ourselves. I mean, we
Hey, try speaking. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
So I think it depends a little bit on the job, right? If you're going to be a web designer, then seeing a portfolio of work and seeing, opportunities and where you've gone out and built stuff or learned new technologies on your own is really good. If you're going to be if you have aspirations to be in coding, then same sort of deal, showing capabilities in that realm. I think for me as a business, on the business side and as a COO, when somebody walked in, what I really took to heart, both in looking at their resume, but more importantly, sitting across the table from them, was their ability to listen and their ability to communicate. And it didn't, I knew when I was interviewing tech guys or gals, I knew I wasn't going to get, I was going to get a completely different type of communication than I would with a sales guy. But they were still, and I think Rabin made a really good point, being able to communicate in an elevator pitch what their position in that technology role could do for the business was always really, so translating, not just thinking about the pure code and what everything is, but how you could help. And it may just be helping a little project, and you don't have to know all the revenue and the profit and the loss of a business to go all the way up that food chain. It's just, you know what, I think that I do this really well, and I think that could translate. I'm a good team player, I listen well, and I communicate well.
Yeah, I would say that elevator pitch, if you're looking at a practical thing to do, most of your resumes aren't going to be packed with a bunch of relevant work experience. And remember how people read resumes. Same way you read any other page. You start at the top and you go down. And I notice two things on a resume. One is if someone puts in, just a short little elevator pitch, couple of lines about who they are or what they want to accomplish. Not I want to be the best sales guy at Dell Tech, but like for example, mine is I enjoy building teams. I believe a rising tide raises all ships, and I live my life with a simple quote from Yoda: "Do or do not, there is no try." Right? That's how I explain myself to people. And if you just have that at the top of your resume, the point of that is to go look at the next thing and to say something and understand that if you put it on your resume, make it relevant, like make it tell a story. And for God's sakes, just hold it away from your face and see if it looks good, and make sure you've actually spell checked everything. Tim, you're laughing. But
I've seen a lot of them that way. My resume I received spelled detail the wrong way. I'm very detail oriented, and it was
that's
a
misspelled.
Oh my goodness.
So that
I would
really
say,
that's
guys, make it, if you can't fit it on one page in like 11-point font, then you've got too many words, right? So just shorten it, clear, concise, single page. Make sure it looks good as you stare at it. Have a little elevator pitch about who you are and what you are at the top. And that all you're trying to do with a resume, you're not getting a job with a resume. You're getting to a conversation. And all you want to do is elicit a conversation with somebody to get to the next time.
Yeah, I'd be interested in what Daniel I know Rabin offered his comments, but from a pure, almost more scientist perspective, how do you look at it?
So I can kind of come with this through two sides. So when I was at KU, I was a lab manager for the KU Biodiesel Initiative. So I didn't really look at resumes, but I was hiring people. And then when I was applying for my job to come back to Kansas, I sent out about 50 job applications or more, and I was just lobbing until I was able to find like what a good fit was. And I honestly actually tailored my resume depending on who I was applying to. So I had like a master resume with like absolutely everything I have ever done ever. And then I had other ones where I tailored it because I have experience in bioengineering, and then I also have experience in renewable fuels. So depending on who I was applying to, I kind of tailored it. And for me, I think when you're a recent graduate, the biggest thing that you need to portray is that you are willing to learn, because whatever you learned in undergrad, they're going to teach you their protocols and the way that they do stuff at the company. So like, this is my third job out of college now, and I went from a company I'm just going to ignore the state because I was there for such a short period of time that's just a different scenario. But I went from an 800 person company total to 30,000 person company total. So those two company cultures were completely different, and the way that they kind of did stuff for scientists was also different. So one of them had, like, Colgate has a very set structure of how you can move yourself up as a scientist, while Renewable Energy Group didn't have that set up yet because, you know, over 100-year-old company versus 27 or 25 years old. So like the biggest thing is showing that you have that you're going to be honest and that you're going to work with integrity. Those are really like the two biggest things, because I was told by my department head at my current job that one of the questions that he asked me was to purposely see if I was going to lie or not. So he was like, what would you tell me how you would analyze cinnamaldehyde? So for most people, you don't know what that is, but to a food scientist, that's what makes it taste like cinnamon. So I had zero idea. So I was like, I listed off what I would do. I'd be like, I would find the boiling point. I would see how volatile it was. I would find its mass spectrum, whatever. And he was like, you know, he nodded or whatever in the interview. But later on, he was like, that proved that you were going to tell me the truth. Because if you would have just like lied out your butt and been like, oh yeah, this molecule is this, then that would have voted poorly. So like, as a scientist, I feel like a really big thing is having integrity and being honest, because the last thing you want is somebody who's going to fudge your numbers.
By the way, that's not just science. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm in tech sales. Robert, you're smiling. Like it, I will tell you the worst thing you can do is lie in an interview. I had to hire and fire somebody in 90 days. It sucked.
I'm sorry, what was the last part, Aaron?
I had to hire and fire somebody in 90 days. And the reason it happened is we got through, the interview was great. He said the right things. He said the right things to the people that I had on the interview panel. And his name's Brett, and he showed up the first day. And by day 2, I realized we made a mistake, and so did he. Right? Because the things and the skills and the things that he needed to be successful for us, he didn't have. But he sold a good game, right? Versus just saying, hey, I need to work on these things. The most important thing you can do in an interview process, like, I'm proof, right? Somebody got through with a few well-tailored lies. But once you get there, Daniel, to your point, they're going to teach you everything when you get there. The biggest thing you guys are learning right now is how to learn, how to be curious. And by getting a degree, you're proving that you're going to spend 5 years getting a degree. Things didn't go perfect. Things didn't happen the way they were supposed to, but you committed to a project long-term and saw your way through it, right? And you know how to learn. And because once you get to Dell or wherever, there's a whole new set of learning that's going to happen. And we're looking for people that are curious and can do that.
You know, Kim, before we get on to the next question, we've seen a lot of overlap. Some of the things you all are suggesting, people that were on other career panels in entirely different industries, they're also making some of those suggestions. And I've had a couple students direct message me saying, oh, I'm taking notes, you know. And so I think a couple things that have come up here, that have come up on other panels, are the importance, as Rabin said, and as Daniel said, and Aaron and Robert just reiterated and supported the importance of really representing yourself well and honestly and with integrity in the interview. Daniel's story is one reason to log in your memory of why you might do that, but of course we do that to because that's, I think what somebody said on a different, that shows folks that you're willing to learn. I think that came up here again, that you can be a good team player. I mean, we're talking about working with other people, other folks. And the other piece, and I'm not doing a great job of it right now, is being efficient, which I think Rabin had brought up, maybe not exactly in that term, but the idea of being able to express yourself effectively but also efficiently as well. So I wanted to bring those up because we know we have people taking notes out there. We just had some HR professionals on the earlier call who were saying the same thing. So I think it's worth reiterating.
I think one quick thing too before you go, Kim, is I think you use the word teamwork, and I think when as most of you all, I mean, there may be one or two of you that's going to hit a home run and start and be working, doing something all by yourself. But odds are, as an entry level first job, you're going to be working as part of a team, whether that's in a lab, whether that's in a research function, whether that's in a sales function. And so back to the question of what am I looking for, is it's that also that being able to work as a team and work, being flexible, being adjusting, not rigid, being open to learning. Because again, you're not going to be running the team day one. You're going to be a team member, and most of your career, even as you go up the food chain, you're still part of a team. So
Even when you're running a team, I run a team and I'm part of the team, right? I have to play both roles every single day.
Yep.
Just one last piece. Kim, Stacy on the earlier call, she was in human resources and hiring for, I don't know how many years she said, but something she said backs up everything that you all just said here. Daniel, goes back to the point you made too, which is companies retrain you. So that sometimes human resource professionals are as much looking for your personality, for that integrity piece, for your honesty, for the way you communicate, that had come up earlier, as much as equal to, maybe even in some cases more important than the skill set, because they can see that you have skill set and they're going to retrain you to work on whatever the things are. I think Rabin, you had said, you talked about getting like different skill sets as you've gone through your educational experience. So that's one thing. And then the other thing Stacy said was, very few times does a candidate go through the job description and tick off everything that is said that's needed in the job description. So don't be scared off, like if you don't have everything that's in the job description. I think she used the term purple squirrel. I don't know what that means, but she said there are no purple squirrels out there. And so don't write yourself off because you can't tick every box. It was something that she said as well.
I think what you all have been talking about is the soft skills versus those hard skills. And that the hard skills, they can train you, that you might have some overlap. And certainly if you are in IT and you're coding, it'd be really nice to have some coding experience and understand some different systems. But the soft skills is really what you all have been focusing on, because you're saying you can teach the others. And so the next key is how to communicate that in an interview and then on your resume. And I just want to put a plug in that next week we will be doing resumes and we will be reviewing resumes. If you'd like to have an individual coaching appointment, we will also be doing mock interviews with members of our mentoring.ku. So please take advantage of that, because you hear it here first. And they're all saying, get connected, know how to communicate, listen effectively. Robert, you said communicate and listen effectively. That classic example of soft skills. So please join us next week for that, because I think it's going to be really helpful. Are there any other questions? We've got about 10 minutes left.
I'd like to say one thing on what you just said of,
Sure.
What do you look at? Like the number one thing, like first pass of an interview, what I'm looking for is, do you care and are you likable? And the reason for those two things is because if you care, then you're going to do the right thing. And if you're likable, somebody's going to help you do it. If you don't care, or you care about the wrong thing, and you're not likable, you're going to go off on a path and nobody's going to help you, right? And I think that some of the things we talked about initially, I think fit into that, right? When you reached out to me, did you take 2 minutes to do a web search or LinkedIn, look at my LinkedIn profile, right? Those things we talked about on helping to reach out and network definitely show the do you care, because you cared enough to take a couple of minutes to do that. Does your resume look good? Are there no typos? You cared enough to make that look good, right? Those kind of start showing those, do you care and are you likable? Because I can fix almost everything after those two things, but I can't teach those two things, right? I can teach you how we do order entry and configurations, but I can't teach you those two things, right? You either have them or you don't.
That's great. I do want to ask a question, because we've really been focusing on networking, reaching out, making those connections. And I think when you have a pretty full resume, and when reaching out to someone like you, Robert, or any of you on the panel that have had so many years of experience, um, it's easy to help somebody that has lots of experience, right? Gosh, you've got 10 years of this and this. But for those students who are just entering the workforce and they don't have a long resume, tell me, are there lots of different jobs available? What do you recommend for that? I mean, it's very intimidating to be a recent grad, as we all know, we've all been there. What advice do you have for that?
I have a good example. Don't be afraid to take a job that is going to be kind of like in the meantime, because it can pay off later. So it was either quit my job in Iowa and not have any job, or have some kind of job that wasn't really the right fit for me, but make it work. So if you kind of have an idea of what direction you want to take your career, then you can at least have that job as your stepping stone. So I encourage people to not be afraid to apply to anything and everything, because I applied from jobs that were like senior scientist and like director of blah blah blah, all the way to like laboratory technician. So like full gamut. And I landed somewhere in the middle eventually. But as long as you show that you're driven, that you want to go towards your goal, I feel like people will look at your resume and see that you want to be able to tell a story with your resume. If you can show like step 1 I was here, step 2 I did this, and this is why I did this, then that gives you kind of a good way to be able to have that conversation in an interview, because they're going to be like, oh, that's interesting, I want to talk to that person about that. So
Yeah, I have a recent example too. The BTBC has several internships. And so I know we're talking mainly to seniors, and that probably doesn't apply at this point in time, but one of the interns literally just walked by my office, who I have done no work with since I've been there in the 3 months, and just said, hey, would it be okay if I scheduled an hour with you just to hear your story? And, we all in some form or fashion have egos, and we like to talk about ourselves and tell our story. But if somebody, if somebody asks us, I mean, and so he just, we went to a conference room and we just sat. And then during that allowed different areas of interest and alignment to come up during our conversation, whether it was work related or not, that kind of helped start to form a little bit of a bond and an understanding. So he wasn't even really, he came out of law school at KU. So he wasn't really looking for me to dramatically help him in the business world. And he was just wanting to kind of pick my brain. And I think that's a valuable way to approach somebody maybe that you're intimidated by, is just to kind of ask to hear their story.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd give the advice to all the seniors the same I give. I do a lot of mentoring and coaching with people on their careers, internal our company and external. And the advice I give everybody is think about what you want to be doing 5 years from now. Because retirement, that's too far away. 10 years, who the hell knows? 5 years though usually is not your current job, but your job, but 2 jobs away for you, based on career planning, right? And so whatever you want to be doing 5 years from now, however how you define that, is take roles and seek roles that purposely move you to there. Daniel, that was a fantastic point you made of, you may not be getting the exact job you want or the exact thing you want, but if you're making a purposeful step towards the thing you want, you're more likely to get there than if you just start wandering around, right? And so just make purposeful steps. That helps build your story, your resume. It helps move you down. And, at some point, you just got to get going, right? You can wait around forever. Perfection is definitely the enemy of getting things done. So just, I operate about 80-90% efficiency and I move, right? If I'm sure, maybe I'm kind of sure, I'll go forward, right? I'll probably make some mistakes, I have, but I would just say, just get moving, right? Just move purposefully.
Yeah.
Rabin, you wanted to do our closing remark. Go ahead.
Sure, yes. I think those stepping stones are very important. And like Daniel said, I also applied for a million jobs before I got to the one I'm currently at. And between where I'm at now and when I worked at the EPA, I was teaching elementary school, in a nature program. And the EPA and elementary education seem very different, but if you can tell the story on paper and really kind of create that through line. I mean, what I do now is, without getting too in the weeds about, my current projects, we are implementing clean water projects in schools in the US. And so it pulls on my federal government experience, pulls on, experience working with education systems, and pulls on my higher ed in hydrology. And, that's not at all what I imagined I'd be doing 5 years ago, but just kind of purposefully taking the steps forward, even if it's not the most perfect step forward, as long as you can look back in hindsight and say, okay, I did, X, Y, and here's how I got to Z. I think it's really important to just be able to, tell that story.
This is great. I want to respect everybody's time. I gave us an hour. Just on behalf of Howard and myself, I just want to thank you for being here. This has been so valuable. They don't want to hear from a career coach and they don't want to hear from Howard, right? They don't want to hear from it. They want to hear from, maybe from Howard, but they definitely don't want to hear from me. But in all honesty, it's nice to have working professionals who can come and speak about this. And I know that it has been very valuable to our students. And I thank you for being here. Thank you, students. I'm looking forward to seeing you tomorrow for day 3 of boot camp. So if you have any questions, as always, you can email me. But at this point, I'd like to just thank you again. And I hope you all have a good rest of the week.
Thank you.
so
Thanks,
much.
Robert.
Yeah, thank
Aaron,
you.
Daniel,
Back
thank you.
to-
Thank you.
Thanks, students.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks again, Daniel.
Yeah, no problem.
great.
Thanks for the invite.
I'm going to reach back out to you on Mentor.